Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. And we begin this morning with the latest on prospective ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he will wait for President Putin in Turkey for peace talks, but only with Putin. Now, this comes as U.S. envoys are being sent to Turkey to help mediate the talks should they happen. Our correspondent, Alex Kadier, is in Turkey, and we cross live to him right now. Good morning, Alex. You're there. What are you hearing? Will Vladimir Putin meet Volodymyr Zelensky?
Good morning. Well, at the moment, the answer to that is simply we don't know yet. We know that Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, will head to Ankara to meet with the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. That will be his first point of arrival in Turkey. And then the question, as he put it, is will Putin fly here? If he does, then President Zelensky is willing to travel to Istanbul to meet with the Russian president. We have heard that if a delegation comes from Russia, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, and others may be part of it, but absolutely no confirmation as to whether or not Vladimir Putin will come here. So clearly, that remains the big question. We understand from behind the scenes that perhaps the big question is also whether or not Donald Trump will come. If the U.S. president diverts from his Gulf tour and comes here to Turkey, then perhaps that will force President Putin's hand. But at the moment, President Zelensky is here, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State from the U.S., is here, Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg, the two envoys looking after the peace process, are coming to Turkey. President Putin, for now, missing in action.
And all hoping for an end to this conflict. Alex Kadier coming to us live from Antalya in Turkey. We will be coming back to you throughout the day for more developments. Thanks for being with us. Supporting Ukraine continues to be one of NATO's priorities, alongside encouraging alliance member states to not only spend more, but invest their spending into their defense and deterrence capabilities, said the chair of the NATO Military Committee, Admiral Giuseppe Cavodragone, during his speech at the opening of the committee's meeting in Brussels.
Our focus must remain on what truly matters: strengthening our deterrence and defense capabilities, enhancing our engagement with partners, and ensuring the security of our citizens and allies against recognized and potential threats. On top of this, our support to Ukraine shall and will remain ironclad, so that when the time will come, Kyiv will be able to sit at the negotiating table from a position of strength. All this requires investing time and resources, because peace and stability cannot be taken for granted and come with a price. But the cost of security is nothing compared to the cost of fighting a war and recovering from it. If we do not continue to invest in this vaccine of deterrence, we expose ourselves to an increased risk of instability and make ourselves unnecessarily vulnerable to threat. Investing more, and not just spending more, is paramount to maintaining our peace now and in the future.
French President Emmanuel Macron also spoke out on the issue, saying that a ceasefire in Ukraine is crucial for peace talks, including on territorial issues. However, Macron mentioned in an interview with French TF1 television that officials in Kyiv do acknowledge that Ukraine cannot retake all of its territory. The French leader was also asked whether France is keen on deploying its nuclear weapons on other EU member states' soil.
A ceasefire today is obviously the best thing for the humanitarian situation in the country, but we need to enter into discussions that will allow us to address territorial issues. Even the Ukrainians themselves are clear-headed enough to say that they will not be able to take back everything that has been taken since 2014. We are ready to open discussions on sharing nuclear weapons with EU countries. I will define the framework very officially in the coming weeks and months, but we have already started the process with the reservations I mentioned, namely that we are not financing it, it is not coming out of what we have, and we are not sharing power to decide.
But now, amidst all these prospective peace talks, Russian forces are ramping up their offensive in southern Ukraine, focusing on breaching the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk region, a key industrial and logistics hub. The Ukrainian side has confirmed that the region, although untouched by direct ground incursions so far, is facing a growing threat from Russian military operations.
Describing the area as the hotspot on the southern front, Ukrainian military says that 4 Russian regiments have concentrated their assault units in the region, trying to break through toward the administrative border of Donetsk, Zaporizhia and the Dnipropetrovsk regions. In response to the escalating threat, local authorities began mandatory evacuations for families and children from villages located just 5 to 15 kilometers from Russian positions. While Russian troops have not yet entered Dnipropetrovsk, the region has faced regular missile, drone and airstrike attacks, resulting in civilian casualties and significant damage to critical infrastructure.
The European Union is slated to apply higher tariffs on Ukrainian imports, according to the latest report by the Financial Times. Citing anonymous diplomats, the broadsheet wrote the scheme would considerably reduce the tariff-free quotas for Ukrainian agricultural products. The new limits are set to be introduced in the coming weeks. Farmers across the bloc have held a number of protests against cheaper produce from Ukraine flooding the EU market. Now, in the opinion of the protesting farmers, agricultural goods from Ukraine are of lower quality and they don't comply with EU-wide standards. Agriculture is a key for war-torn Ukraine as it provides employment for 14% of the country's population and makes up more than 40% of overall exports. According to a new report from the Stockholm Institute of Transition Economics, Russia's economy faces mounting economic pressure due to its invasion of Ukraine and Western sanctions. Now, although Kremlin officials continue to claim the Russian GDP rose by 4.3% in 2024, Swedish researchers warn the apparent resilience is very misleading.
According to the report, shifting the economy to a wartime footing has so far kept the Russian economy afloat. At the same time, the document says that reliance on opaque financing, distortionary resource allocation and shrinking fiscal buffers makes it unsustainable in the long run. Presenting the findings, researchers from the institute questioned the Kremlin's claim of 10% inflation, pointing out that the Russian central bank introduced an unusually high policy rate of 21%. Moreover, scientists don't think that Russia's claimed budget shortfall of just 2% of GDP annually corresponds to reality. They argue that if off-budget military financing through the banking system was accounted for, the actual deficit could be twice as high.
The European Union is expected to agree on the 17th package of sanctions against Russia, which will make it harder for the country to sell oil for prices higher than those set by Western countries. Now, as stated by the Polish Minister of Finance, Andrzej Domański, Russia must be put under constant pressure.
Thursday will see ambassadors of EU member states greenlight the new package of sanctions, which subsequently will be discussed during the bloc's foreign ministers' meeting on May 20th. The new package adds more than 30 companies from Turkey, Serbia, Uzbekistan and Vietnam accused of exporting technology to Russia, which is then used on the front lines in Ukraine. This will be the second sanctions package introduced during the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union. The last one was introduced in February, coinciding with the 3rd anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
The EU General Court has ruled that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was in breach of EU transparency rules when she refused access to text messages between herself and the CEO of the drug company Pfizer. The case stems from 2021 during the COVID pandemic, when a journalist from the New York Times requested access to communications around vaccine contract negotiations. The refusal puts into question the transparency and openness of the European Commission President and her direct entourage, as the contract between the EU and Pfizer was worth billions of euros. Now, von der Leyen personally signed off on it, while also leading the institution that is supposed to oversee its legality. Journalists have long complained about the inaccessibility of the European Commission's highest echelons of decision-making. Von der Leyen claimed she could not disclose the messages as she had not kept them. The General Court, which is the second highest court of the European Union, however, dismissed that argument. NATO's Lightning Griffin 25 exercises are currently underway in Estonia. Now, their purpose is to bring together allied troops for a series of joint drills and tests in a simulated Article 5 scenario. The goal is to test and improve how quickly allied forces mobilize and respond to active aggression from adversaries, primarily Russia and Belarus.
The Griffin Lightning 25 exercises organized by NATO's multinational corps Northeast are currently underway in Estonia. These exercises aim to test the operational capability and readiness of the Allied forces. This year, over 16,000 personnel are expected to participate, with Allied forces presence including Denmark, France, Great Britain and Poland. For the first time, as well as a full NATO member, Sweden is participating. We've had a chance to speak to the Lieutenant Colonel of the 71st Brigade of the Swedish Armed Forces, who underlined some of the key challenges as well as lessons learned that Sweden has already been able to extract from these exercises.
I would say that we're taking into consideration how the opponent, how they're conducting the war in Ukraine. We get a feeling about that and get to experience that of course, in a controlled situation within the exercise. But so far, it's been challenging. So the exercises are covering many domains, so to say, on the ground, in the air, and so on. So I think so far it's been a really good training opportunity to be a part of it.
The overarching goal of these exercises is to, however, apply the lessons learned from the theater of war in Ukraine and how the Allied forces respond to any acts of provocation or open aggression perpetrated by Russia and Belarus. From Estonia for TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
The first semi-final of the 2025 Eurovision Song Contest is officially over. Now, 10 countries won a ticket to the grand final, which will be held in Basel on May 17.
Performers who were able to secure a spot in the grand final include Swedish group Kai, whose song Bara Bada Bastu is the favorite to win the entire competition. According to bookmakers, the comedy song, the title of which translates to Let's Take a Sauna, has a 40% chance of winning this year's edition of the Eurovision Song Contest. Apart from the Swedes, the grand final will also see musicians from Norway, Albania, Iceland, Poland, the Netherlands, San Marino, Estonia, Portugal, Ukraine, Italy and Spain. There are still 10 spots left, which will be filled on Thursday evening following the second semi-final.
And on that note, we end this edition of World News here on TVP World. But don't go away. We have more here on TVP World news, commentary, and features. Stay tuned.